Well, welcome everybody. My doctorate research found that 80% of teachers agreed with inclusion, but said, I don't have the time, resources, or support to make it work. My passion since I did my doctorate research is actually to give you the time savers, the support and resources to make a difference to you and the children you know. Whether you're a teacher, teacher assistant, whether you're a parent, an early educator, I don't know, whatever role you're in, I think it's about finding the resources that actually then give you the confidence. And as you know, I always say strategies wear out. Not every strategy works for everybody. So I'm always looking for resources that give you a range of tips, strategies, ideas. And over the years, if I haven't been able to find that resource, I've written my own books, which is why I've written a lot of my own books. You know, my practical books, practical communication, practical maths and practical sensory is everything I learned when I worked in a specialist school, so that you've got all of that. So I am always about giving you the best tips, time savers, resources, and hopefully support through this podcast, through my social media, through my emails. And please sign up for my emails because they really are full of tips and information. And this year I'm introducing to try, I know you're all busy, so I'm trying this new thing. We'll be like 3 tips to try, 2 resources, or, you know, it'll be 3, 2, 1, like just try and keep it simple every week for you. So let me know if you like the new format. I'm trialing it starting this week, so hopefully you'll get to see that and let me know what you think. So this week's podcast is all the resources that I think can make a difference. But one of the things I would love you to think about this year is joining me for a course. Now, as you know, you can join me face-to-face. You can join me live virtual, and I'm doing a live virtual over 2 afternoons. So many people told me last year, I just can't get released, or they registered to come to a live virtual or face-to-face. And look, ended up doing an online course, which is fine. But if you prefer the live virtual format, I'm doing it over 2 afternoons. So I hope you can join me for that. It's a great way. And I do it in New South Wales. I do it at a lot of schools around Sydney where I go over a couple of weeks, or I've got a school where I've done it over like 1 week and then we had a break and then like 4 weeks later. So teachers have time to put the things in place. And after the first session, I'll collect questions for the second. So I think that's a really good learning way to do learning. We actually get to take away, implement, and then we come back and relook at it and then build on our knowledge plus do the rest of the workshop. All my workshops are accredited. So if you're looking for accredited, well, all my Sue Larkey workshops are accredited. Anyway, confusing. Check it out. Every state's different. But basically you get a certificate. And like my face-to-face live virtual Sue Larkey, what I call sort of my original course or my foundation course is accredited if you're looking for some training. In the catalogue is also, I've got a nice new visual summary of all the courses, what age group they're for, if they're accredited or not. It's like a tick. It's so much easier to read what you'll learn in the course, how many hours it is. You know, I have 2-hour courses, 3-hour courses, 5-hour courses, the 3 teacher assistant courses, so you can compare them, the new PDA course. And I know it is a little bit overwhelming how many courses I've got. So that's why I want you to be able to compare them in a nice visual. And as we always know, visuals are so much easier for us and the children we know. So have a look at the back of the catalogue. So I'd love you to grab a cuppa, download the catalogue, and have a look at the resources as I'm talking through them. I hope you can join me this year for a workshop, whether it's online on demand, face-to-face, or live virtual. Make this your priority this year. If you haven't already, join me and you enjoy my podcast. I promise you'll enjoy doing a course with me this year. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. So I thought this week I would encourage you to grab a cuppa, download my catalogue, And I'm going to talk through all the resources and why I think they're helpful, why I wrote some of the books myself. So I don't have anything in my catalogue I don't personally use or find helpful. But if you go to my website, it can be a bit overwhelming. It's like 300 things on there and you can get a little bit caught up in what you need. So what I thought is, if I send you out the catalogue, or if you're a podcast listener, just download it. It looks really good on your phone, your iPad. You don't need to print it out. I recommend download it so you can just refer back to it when it works for you. It's a PDF, so I use an iPad. I can just save it in my books. I have a whole lot of different ways, but I just save it as a PDF. And then you can go back to it or show other people, or when you want to order, you can flick through it. I think it's a lot easier. So I guess I would love you to think today, like, well, what is your challenge? Are you looking for some visual supports? Are you looking to understand behaviour? Are you looking to help children manage their emotions? Or are you working in the early years and have children who haven't got a diagnosis and don't know where to start? Or do you want to talk to children about autism spectrum, to the class or to a child themselves? So whether you're a parent, teacher, educator, teacher assistant, there is something in here for you. There's also like a teens year and beyond for secondary. There's a whole section on ADHD in the catalogue. So the catalogue has over 19 pages. So I am going to talk it through, but I'm just going to give you sort of a brief of each of the resources. So even if you're driving along listening, I had an email this morning from a teacher that listens in the car. If you're that sort of teacher or parent that listens in the car, it still might remind you of some of the resources that can support you. Now, I know you can go and Google stuff now, or even go on ChatGPT, and it can download you 1,000 things. But I honestly still love a paper book. I love picking it up and you can flick through it. It's far more focused than going from one topic to the other. I mean, I was looking up something last night and I ended up just going down this rabbit hole, printing out a whole lot of pages. And when I looked at them this morning, I'm like, really, Sue? What were you thinking? And I think the point is that sometimes books are far more succinct and have everything there. So that's just me. I'm a book girl, whether it's on your Kindle or a paper book, but that's who I am. Now, if you're outside Australia, all my books you can get them as ebooks. So that's a really good option for you. I mean, you can get them inside Australia too, but just if anyone's listening outside Australia, a lot of these books you'll be able to find elsewhere anyway, because Jessica Kingsley, who is my publisher, a lot of the books are hers because she was the first person really to publish books around autism spectrum disorder. Now we have a number of publishers who do that, and I use a range of other people, but because Jessica was sort of first, I use a lot of her resources because I've been teaching a long time now. I can't believe it. Where does the time go? I was like, I think it's 35 years next year since I started teaching. So let's dive in. So grab a cuppa or a drink or whatever you feel like. Download the catalogue if you aren't driving, or so you can refer back to it. So the first lot of books that you'll see in the catalogue are my books. So my number one bestseller is The Ultimate Guide to School and Home. And I wrote this with Anna Tullemans, and I love the fact it has a teacher and a parent writing a book together. And that's why I wrote a lot of books with Anna. And so what I would recommend with this book, that if you have a challenge, go to the back of the book and then flick to the page that's of interest to you. So this book has everything from understanding diagnosis to getting your driver's license. It has everything from, choosing a preschool, I'm pretty sure, through to choosing a secondary and post-school options. Now, I met a grandma who was a primary carer many years ago and who said, Sue, this book has been a lifesaver. Basically, she said, like, if we've got a birthday party, I look in the book. If my child's struggling with homework, I look in the book. And all of those tips are in there. So if you don't have any of my books, this is the one I'd recommend. Just get The Ultimate Guide to School and Home. It has a key on the front, and I really would say it's key strategies to make a difference for neurodiverse children. It has some stuff on ODD, PDA, ADHD, all in that book. Now, I mean, Anna and I probably should update it, seeing the language has changed. But yes, I think we've got autism spectrum disorder on the front, and we're moving towards autism spectrum. As you know, I'm moving towards neurodiversity. Now, the next two books on there are the red and blue teacher assistant books, which I wrote with Anna. And the number one question I get from teacher assistants, or angels as I call them, if you've never heard me call teacher assistants angels, the reason I call them angels is every state I go to calls them something different: learning support, education support officer, student service, I don't know, 100 different names. But in my case, I don't care what their label is an angel. And if you have a good angel, you'll have a good year. Parents, I hear you saying yes. If you think of your child's best year, they had a good angel. Because for me, when I've got 30 odd kids in my class, my angel often picks up on things that need to be done. They can notice the child's anxiety. They can see the challenges. They can see what supports need to be put in place. And as I say to you, it's easier to change the structure than change the child. What the red and blue teacher assistant books are full of are structural changes. What are all the changes a teacher assistant can put in place to support the child, whether they're in the room or not? Because some teacher assistants mightn't see the child all day or every day. So what Anna and I want you to do is put in place the strategies so when you're not there, the child does have those systems in place. So a lot of what my teacher assistants are doing are giving the children the systems and tools to be in place. And also when they get to secondary, they often don't want their angel with them. So from year 5 and above, I think we need to teach them their own, system. So teaching them the color coding the books from year 5, having in place getting started routines, like working out the barriers to getting started. In fact, I was in a school at the end of last term, and the last day of term, always a tricky day in schools, but it was actually fabulous to see. And one of the boys, they were cleaning out their tote boxes, and he has massive executive functioning problems. Like, he's in year 5, and I would say that's his biggest barrier. And for our ADHD children, executive functioning often is the biggest challenger. If you don't know what executive functioning is, it's working memory, it's prioritizing, it's getting started, it's emotional regulation, all of those things, which you're going to hear me talk about quite a lot this term, I suspect, because going into schools always reminds me what the challenges are. And for him, I saw a number of challenges throughout the day. One was they got, like a rubrics of activities to choose, and he just flicks between all of them. There's just too many choices. So in the teacher assistant book, one of the things we talk about is minimizing choices. And for him, the choices actually were a barrier to learning. And those of you who did my workshops last term, I know I talked about this quite a lot, that no choice is a good choice. So often we think choices make life easier, but think of yourself. If you have too many choices, it can be overwhelming. So maybe this child only needs 2 or 3 choices. Anyway, so that was a barrier to getting started on his work and some other things. But cleaning out his tote box, he didn't even know he needed help. So I had seen his tote box earlier in the day. I was like, oh my goodness, what a mess. And I was like, wow, I don't think he knows how to clean it out. Well, later on in the day, they had to clean out their tote box, and I went over and I said to him, are you going to clean out your coat box? And he went, no, which was sort of a stock standard answer. I went, oh, do you need some help cleaning out your tote box? And he's like, no. So that stock standard answer for me is where a child answers no very quickly and haven't really thought about it. Because can you understand, for him, he hasn't actually thought that through. Now, what I would say is this. I would have paired him up with someone so that he could, because the other kids all knew what to do. They were sorting that out. So I would have paired him up with somebody because he didn't know where to start, what to do. There was an opportunity for some collaboration with a peer, but also then he would have visually seen what another child was doing, because for him, he didn't know where to start. He had no idea how to tidy up his tote box. And what I've done in the past with my students is actually taken a photo of their tote box with their pencil case, how it should look, so they know. Now, when I started helping him do it, I'm like, oh, how about I'll have a look and I'll see what needs doing. Once I started doing it, he got going. But he had 3 pencil cases in there for a child who struggles with choices. Can you imagine every time he goes to start work and every pencil case was the same colour? It wasn't like he could differentiate. Anyway, his teacher, amazing. And I know she's going to put in place some strategies, but she's in a busy, complex Year 5 class. And these are the things as a teacher we never get to. But this is where my teacher assistant often would see that problem, would have seen the 3 pencil cases, seen the child doesn't know how to clean it up. So in his case, I would be using the teacher assistant to set up a lot of those systems. So back to what I was talking about. Teacher assistant, red and blue book, they are companion guides. People ask me all the time, which one should I get? What I recommend, on the website, we actually have the contents page and it lets you know what's in the red book and what's in the blue book. And there is a special if you buy both together, because I'm passionate you have both. So highly recommend the teacher assistant red and blue book. Oh, teachers, if you don't have a teacher assistant, these books are for you too. I can't tell you how many teachers have bought these books and like, oh my goodness, they've just saved me so much time because it's got all the structures and system changes that I need in place. The next book is my first book I ever wrote called Making a Success, which I should have dedicated to my student Michael, who you've heard me talk about. I've had a number of teachers in specialist classrooms ask me where to start, and I realised that I started, as you know, in an autism, started in mainstream, but ended up in an autism school, and a lot of my first books were all what I learned in a specialist school. And I realised I haven't been talking about that so much. And I guess over COVID, because I haven't been out in schools, and I guess because a lot of specialist schools I don't necessarily go into. I mainly go into mainstream schools now. Gosh, I don't like that word mainstream, a special school. Wouldn't it be nice if we changed that? But anyway, I mainly now go into mainstream schools, so I get a little bit distracted with those things and forget there's a lot of special ed teachers who are new and who need resources and ideas. And I've met some beautiful special education teachers who have specialist classrooms in the last term while I've been back face to face, who were looking for ideas. Now, Making It a Success is the book for you, because what Making a Success is really was what I did in my classroom in my specialist school. But then when I went out to mainstream schools, I realized they needed this information too. So if you're a newer teacher in a specialist school, it has everything to like setting up your schedule. Now, because of the kinesthetic, you can show the child the schedule, but getting the child to do the schedule as their first task of the day is really important. Now, some of my children would just be Velcroing on the activities for the day. Some might be writing the activities for the day. But I would prefer a child every day was writing out their daily schedule than actually doing a writing task, because it is actually really important to set that child up. It reduces anxiety around transition. Often, one of my little boys used to reorder the things in the way he wanted, or I'd notice his anxiety as he was doing it, so I could tell where he was up to. Some of my children, I do it as a cut and paste activity. So you might be just doing the now, next, later, but getting the child to do that, not you, is much better learning for them, the kinesthetic involvement. So it starts off with things like that. Then it has lots of worksheets and activities, but each worksheet and activity you can do in 3 or 4 different ways, because in a specialist classroom, I had 8 kids, I don't have time to make new things every day. And you've heard me talk about it before, the power of repetition. Children on the spectrum love repetition. So why, that cutting and pasting activity, we might do that for a whole week of their schedule. If we're doing the months of the year as an activity or the days of the week, the first time we might be colouring in the days we come to school. The second time we might be cutting and pasting. The third time we might be ordering. The fourth time we might be writing down what we do on those days or got coming up. So you can use the same worksheet in a whole lot of different ways depending on the child's level and where they're at. Also, the advantage of that is when you work in a specialist classroom, you have to be a lot quicker to adapt activities depending on the child's anxiety, how they've come in the morning. So when I use the same worksheet in different ways, I have that flexibility And the kids, actually, it makes them more flexible because I'm using the same worksheet in different ways. So when people say children should get used to change, this is one way I get them to use the same worksheet in different ways. And it's actually teaching them flexibility, which is part of executive functioning, having flexible mindset. So being able to be flexible. So anyway, check that out. If you're a specialist classroom, I think that one will be for you. Now, my next book is called Developing Social Skills. I'm actually moving towards social emotional learning, and you're going to hear more about that this term. In fact, I'm just putting together a free webinar to start the term. Make sure you jump on my website and have a look. That free webinar is going to be on helping children with social knowledge or social emotional learning. And this term, I'm putting together a new course on social emotional learning. I've had my emotional regulation course for a while, but the other part of that is developing social skills and social knowledge, as people with a lived experience like to call it. And I think that's really powerful, calling it social knowledge. However, I am seeing children, because of COVID and a whole lot of reasons, not attending school full time. And at the end of the day, the research shows if we increase children's social emotional learning, in fact, I wrote down this stat. What have I done with it? I hate it when I did. So when we increase children's social emotional learning, something like 22% fewer conduct issues in the research. So what it means by that is that children are more engaged, there's less behaviour. And I hate the word conduct, but that's where the research came from. So we know that actually increasing social emotional learning, 27% of children have an increase in academic performance if we increase their social emotional learning. Now, this makes sense in collaborative classrooms where we're working in busy classrooms that rely on group work and rely on social emotional skills every day. Very different to when we sit in rows. Anyway, I will be talking more about that and my Developing Social Skills book quite a lot this term. Oh my goodness, I have been talking for too long. Okay, The Essential Guide to Secondary School. Again, I wrote that with Anna Tullemans. Highly recommend that you start getting children ready from year 5 for transition to secondary. Please start from year 5. Now, as I mentioned, some of you in specialist schools were looking for books. On page 3 are the books for you. Practical communication programs, practical sensory programs, the early years program, because a lot of you will have children who are still at that early years level. And in that early years, the book's spiral bound for a reason. A lot of people are like, oh, that's not, I imagined a nice, proper bound book. That's actually more expensive to create, their traditional book. The reason it's spiral bound, I want you to photocopy it, highlight it, add in your own notes and strategies that you're using for children. And this has all the foundation skills. So this would be your program if you're in a specialist program, teaching a child to wait, to share, to finish, to sit on the mat, to request, to play, to, now, next, later, using visuals. Like everything is in that book. It is such a good resource. So I highly recommend you look at the early years. And if you're with children under 5, it's a must have. It's like, it is just every skill you need to teach a child, how to teach them to cut, to draw, fine motor skills. There's everything, getting ready for school, like teaching them to put on their coat, take it off, button, everything's in that book. So I highly recommend anyone with under 5, anyone in a specialist. And the other book on that page is my tips for toileting, which I know you've all heard me talk about. And that is my passion to get children out of nappies ASAP. Heaps of practical strategies in that. Then if you turn to page 4, there is lots of visual support. So that includes the photo cookbooks, which are Heather Durant and I, who work together at the Autism School, made. And if you have any children that are disengaged, I promise you those photo cookbooks from the Autism School that, I learnt when I was in the Autism School are amazing. Again, you can teach a whole curriculum through cooking. So the books are spiral bound. Again, so that's where I was going. Again, they're spiral bound, so you can photocopy them. The children can cut them out. You can put them in order. You can do cut and pasting. You can, what ingredients go in the fridge, what goes in the pantry. Like, The manual that goes with it lays out everything. You can teach communication, requesting more or pointing to things. You can teach, when I was doing picture exchange communication, for some of my children, they were the first pictures they used. One of my boys wasn't very interested in a lot of things, but he loved Milo. And the first things he learnt was requesting the milk, the Milo, the glass, the spoon, using those photos to do that. So highly recommend you have a look at that page. Then there's a whole lot of other next level of visuals. So if you're teaching children to read, literacy, reading and comprehension, there's some fabulous books on page 5. And there's also on there for any of you in the specialist school, this is the other book I highly recommend, which is Visual Learning by Jodie Lee. It's a whole heap of board maker, 100 pages of board maker activities that are pre-made. So you can laminate them and the child writes over the top in a whiteboard texter. Or again, you can do them laminate and Velcro, so the child Velcros them on, or you can just use them as a cutting, pasting, child writing on themselves. But it saves you hours. And again, spiral bound, so it's easy to photocopy and to use over and over without breaking the book. I hate it when books fall apart. That's why I do spiral binding. Also on that page is one of my favourite books for children who have difficulty with motor skills. Sally, who's an OT, has been on my podcast a couple of times. And the Motor Skill Flip book, if you set up stations, this is the book for you. You can set up a whole lot of stations to help children with their motor skills. Now, what Sally taught me that I cannot believe I didn't know before, that you have to do gross motor to improve fine motor. So if you think of a baby, they learn to roll over before they learn to pick something up. So you have to actually increase the child's core before you can move to the fine motor, or work on both at the same time. But there's no point working on a child's handwriting if you haven't got all those crossover skills, you haven't got the whole core happening. So that book is this flip book. It is so cool. The kids love it. Teacher assistants, this is an awesome book for your resources too. If you're lucky enough to have a bit of a budget in your teacher assistant pot in your school, I would recommend getting the Motor Flip book, the red and blue teacher assistant book, and maybe even the visual learning book would be helpful, the one above that. The next page is all social skills, well, what I'm calling social emotional learning now. Lots of great books. On that one, if you have children who are oppositional defiant disorder or pathological demand avoidance, PDA, Why Do I Have To is one of my favorite books on that page. The reason I love that book, it explains why do I have to do homework? Why do I have to listen to the teacher when they're talking about something I don't like? I have found that a very helpful book that a lot of my ODD and PDA children like to go back and refer to. And it's called Why Do I Have To? And I think that is a question I get from these students all the time. And I just, being in a book, it's not me. So there's not that demand. They're actually reading the book and absorbing it at their own level. Some of the books, I get their parent to read the stories. I get the parent to read it or the child to read it in their own voice. And then they can re-listen to it. And I found that really helpful, getting them to hear themselves reading Why Do I Have To is actually, I don't know what that is in a brain sense. I'm not a psychologist, but it just seems to really help. So I highly recommend you look at that. Any of you have got children starting school next year, How to Stop Your Words from Bumping is every social script they need to know. So how to line up, how to sit on the mat, what to do if someone says they won't play with you, how to say sorry. All my favourite social scripts are in that How to Stop Your Words from Bumping. Then we have the time timers. They've got these amazing new classroom sets where they're 3 different colour timers. There's primary and secondary colours. The next page, page 8, is all my favourite behaviour books. The Behaviour Solutions for Inclusive Classrooms, there's 3 in the set. The one at the top of the page is a must-have. And I know you've all heard me say it. I call it See a Behaviour, Look It Up. So basically, parents, you need this book. So when teachers say to you, oh, what do I do? Your child's taking off their shoes and socks, or they're humming, or they're doing a runner. You can look in that book and you can go, do it, do it, do it. I think parents having a book to refer to, and I find the same when I go in and to a school, I don't know the teachers necessarily, and I come in being a bit too authoritarian. I find it better that we look it up in the book together and talk it through. I just find a book a more neutral resource. Anyone in learning support roles, I think books are a very, very important part of that you can sticky note and go, hey, I noticed this, here's some ideas. So, I'd much rather when I'm talking to a teacher about a child who's struggling with organisation that I have a book and I go, here's some ideas in the book so that they can read it, absorb it, see it. It's not me coming and going, you should do this, you should do that. Anyway, that's my experience of it. There's also one of my favourite books for girls on there called Aspergirls. There's a lot of books now for girls, but I love Aspergirls because it's everyone's lived experience. So they'll talk about girls' experiences and then women and girls will share their lived experience of how that looked for them because everybody's different. Oh, Kids in the Syndrome Mix is a fabulous book that is on the top left of page 8. Every school should have that book. It explains all the different, what is LD, Autism Spectrum, Tourette's, bipolar, ADHD. And it's really invaluable because that's why I like the term neurodiversity. Most of my students have more than one diagnosis. So I recommend that you have that book as a flick to understand each diagnosis. Now, the next page is for any of you who have children with complex behaviour. If you got to the end of term and you're like, I don't know, I'm exhausted. I saw a teacher like this at the school I was at. She has tried everything. Amazing teacher. She's absolutely exhausted because she has a child with challenging behaviour. She has a complex classroom. It's very busy. It's open plan. There's a lot going on. They're 6 years old. So a 6-year-old, you have such a diverse age in emotions. And anyway, I really feel for her. And honestly, and I listened to the podcast on to medicate or not to medicate, but I really felt for this teacher. The reason that nothing is really working or only working for a short time is this little boy. He's been diagnosed with anxiety. He is so anxious and he has ADHD. He is only attending school part-time, and I feel for him only attending part-time. I feel for her. I feel for everyone in that situation. So and I don't blame the parents for not wanting to medicate at all. I'm not for or against medication, but I'd probably give it a go for him because looking on, I just think until we get the anxiety down, his amazing teacher is exhausted because the strategy is really, the way I look at it, there's 2 dials. There's the anxiety dial and the engagement dial. And when the anxiety's up, the engagement's down. We've got to get the anxiety down. And I just hope that they work out what that is. And, you've got to try different tools in the toolbox, as Tony Attwood would say. Many of you have done Tony's course. And medication's only one tool in the toolbox. But I look at everything else the school's trying and the parents. They're doing cognitive behaviour therapy. They're doing all these amazing things. I just wonder if that's the missing tool. But it's just a wonder, just a thought. Anyway, if you have any children who are highly anxious, then my favourite book is From Anxiety to Meltdown. And in fact, I've got on there a must-have. But there is also some other books there on self-injurious behaviour, overcoming anxiety in children and teens, de-escalation strategies, anxiety and mental health. Like there's a whole lot of things there. But I really believe you need a range of strategies for those complex children. So have a look at those. And then the next page has Tony Attwood's books. Now, the way I always say when people come to Tony's courses, that his first book, the purpley blue one, is like just an introduction to Autism Spectrum for parents and professionals. And the complete guide is the complex guide. Don't buy that and think you're going to read it from back to front. Use that more as a reference. So if you've got a child who is bullying or being bullied, turn to the back of the book and read that. If you want to understand about how to create the toolbox, if you want to know more about medication, Tony's a psychologist. He's the authority, not me. I'm just a teacher. But that book is a must-have, particularly for, I think, year 3 and above. It has all the challenges that you will be seeing, but also coming from autism spectrum and Asperger's, as it's called in this book, is a different way of thinking, not a dysfunction. So really all the practical strategies you can put in place. And then page 11 is all Kay's books, which you know I love, The Red Beast, The Panicosaurus, Disappointed Dragon, Green-Eyed Goblin. There's a few more in that series now, but helping children understand their emotions. And then there's also Lauren Brackner's books, The Kid's Guide to Being Awesome, Keeping Calm Guru. And again, when I'm looking at social emotional learning this term, part of it is social, part of it's emotional, and you need both. So for example, in the webinar at this stage, I think I'm going to be doing stuff on winning and losing because a lot of my children get anxious about that. When you win or lose a game, first there is the social, saying the right thing. Oh, I lost, but, can we have another game? When a child loses, what's the language we want to teach them to say? And you need to check with the peers around that. So there's that side. But then there's the emotional regulation. Like I have children seeing they're about to lose who will tip the board game over or do a runner. So the social and emotional go together. That's why I like the emotional learning. So in in Lauren's books, she has and Kay's books, they're all about understanding your emotions. And if children can't label their emotions, then they can't actually regulate their emotions. So in Lauren's book, are you tired? So what do you need to do? Or are you fidgety? Then what do you need to do? Different reactions. So have a look at those amazing books. The next lot of books are about celebrating difference, which are all cats have Asperger's syndrome, all dogs have ADHD, Gus and the Asparagus, and if you have girls, I Am Aspie Girl is a must-have. Then there's some other books, the Gremlin series, which again is around anger, anxiety, stress. Really fabulous workbooks to use, particularly I would recommend if you're in regional areas and you don't have access to a psychologist. The Gremlin books are a fantastic series. And then there's some more books I love, the Can I series. So Can I Tell You About ODD? Can I Tell You About Asperger's? Can I Tell You About Dyspraxia? They're gorgeous books for the class or children themselves. And now we get to the ADHD, page 14. So my favorite ADHD book is Helping Kids and Teens with ADHD in Schools. Now, a lot of people seem to see the teens word and don't realize it's for kids as well. And this is an Australian book, so I'm not sure if you can find it in the rest of the world, but it is a comprehensive guide to helping kids with ADHD. It's a workbook. It's fun. My ADHD kids love it. Again, teacher assistants, Angels, great resource for you for ADHD kids. It's just so practical, and I like it. Says use tried and tested strategies and top tips. Absolutely. And photocopical workbook, and lots of that executive functioning, actually, because executive functioning is a muscle. You can actually train it. So it's actually like going to the gym. We've got to practice these skills. So that is fabulous. And then parents, there's like organising your ADD and ADHD child. There's my favourite book on executive functioning is Executive Functioning Dysfunction, which is by Rebecca Moyes. And there's another one called Autism and Everyday Executive Functioning. And again, that is helping children actually improve and putting in place those strategies to improve their executive functioning. So highly recommend that. 10 years and beyond, there's a whole lot of The Wonderful World of Work. I highly recommend the Asperteens Toolkit for the children themselves. A lot of my teens who don't want our help, this is a brilliant book. And it's like a comic style, and the kids love it. That's a really good one. I don't know if if you look on the website, there's a new book on bullying too, that in that teen section, that I highly recommend, that actually giving the children the book so they can read it at their own leisure, or actually just reading it to them if they're not readers. I think it's really, because they often don't know what to ask. And it's the same with the next page on puberty. Children don't know what to ask, or often don't understand what's happening, but when you give them a book, it gives them the language to explain what's happening. And that's why I like the bullying book I was mentioning and the Asperteens Toolkit, because it actually gives them the language they need. And then sensory on page 17, a whole lot of great sensory. Particularly if you have children with difficulty with interoception, I highly recommend Are You Feeling Cold, Yuki, which is a beautiful picture book. But there's also for you, there's a whole lot of an occupational therapy guide for autism, which is brilliant. And that is like understanding special needs children and their sensory processing. There's also a whole lot of sensory processing games in the simple low-cost games and activities. That's a great one for your preschool. And then there's one on building sensory-friendly classrooms. I think that's by Rebecca Moyes, who wrote the one on executive functioning. If you've got a busy classroom, particularly a lot of the open plan classrooms, it's a small book, but honestly got some great tips about how to make those areas more functional, really, for many of our children. Then make sure you have a look at the sensory tools. We've got some new ones on there that I love, the pom-pom keychain, the little smiley men stretch, because you can use those keychains as your transition objects. Those of you who came to my workshops last term, when people asked about that, I showed you those transition objects and the porcupine ball too. And I highly recommend you put those on their pencil case so that if they are in a transition activity, they've got something to fidget with. Highly recommend that. So I hope that's given you a good idea of the sorts of resources you might be interested in having this year. I truly believe that having resources on hand make you feel supported, because when you look in a book, you're like, oh, okay, other people have experienced this, this is one of my challenges. I just find books so helpful. I know you've got ChatGPT and I know you've got Google, but you can spend hours going down one of those little Googling funnels or those ChatGPTing. I think all the books and resources I've recommended, you can just pick up, refer to, keep going. They really save you a lot of procrastination. The other thing I mentioned at the start was about the upcoming courses and how I've now got a nice summary for you of all the courses that are available. So please have a look at all of those. But honestly, over the holidays, I was looking through all the feedback that people have given from the courses, and it does blow my mind what people say that they take away from my courses. If you have never done one of my courses, then I would highly recommend think about doing one this year, because people always say to me, Sue, I wish I'd done this before. This is not just tips and strategies. It's so practical. It's given me the confidence. I hear that word so often. It's given me the confidence to implement these things. So check out all the courses. If you're still not sure what course is for you, please email me. I'm always happy to help with any of those. I have also got, make sure you subscribe to my email list, because I have an upcoming free webinar that is going to be behaviour solutions for setting up your classroom. This is a really important free webinar. The way I look at it, if a child is in a wheelchair, we automatically put in the ramps before the child attends the school. We're like, oh, we need to get the ramps in place. So what are the ramps to help a child who is neurodiverse engage in your classroom? It's easier to change the structure than change the child. What are the structural changes we need in place? What are the things that make a huge difference? So, for example, you might see behaviour like child doesn't want to write, messy handwriting, Well, that's the behaviour. What are the solutions? Is it a pencil grip? Is it actually occupational therapist activities, which I have in the ebook that goes with the program? Like, what are the things you need to put in place to support that child? Does this child have a thing called dysgraphia? So these are all the sorts of things I'm going to talk about in the podcast in the webinar. So make sure you sign up. You can either come on the day or watch the replay. It's an hour of power. Look, people always tell me I talk too fast, but honestly, wouldn't you prefer I talk fast in an hour than I say join me for 2 hours? 2 hours just sounds too much for me. So hope you can join me. Please make sure that my emails aren't ending up in your spam. So make sure you whitelist me or open a few emails so Google knows you liked my emails. If you're not an email person, make sure you subscribe to me on social media, Facebook, Instagram. I'm now doing some TikTok, because that is a great way to get the information if you're not an email person or your inbox is full. Often it's more accessible through social media, and I normally put the same quotes and information and links in my social media every week. So I hope you are ready to do some learning. I hope you're going to see me at courses. And please, if you do see me face to face or you just see me in the street and you're a podcast listener, come up and tell me. I love hearing that you enjoy these podcasts. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.suelarkey.com.au.